And that brings us to a by-election in Victoria next weekend, one usually of no consequence, especially with the governing party not even involved. But because they're not, Labor and the Greens will go head-to-head, and that will provide an important test of their relative strengths in inner Melbourne. This morning we'll be joined in the studio by the Victorian leaders of Labor and the Greens, Daniel Andrews and Greg Barber. But before then, we'll check out how the Sunday papers covered the Greens discussion at the conference yesterday. And Phil Curry, at times you'd think they're having this discussion not aware that anybody else was listening. No,
it was a classic one. Old school Labor blue. I think the Telegraph Labor blows up. Fairly apt headline. We should remember amongst this all, though, that the motion they were debating did pass with the support of both factions, so including the left. But I think the left was pretty cranky at the fact that this was dropped on them a week ago by the right, by Dastyari House, that this was going to come up, and they've bit their lip largely all week, and then decided to vent a little bit on the way. But then they ended up backing the motion.
But they supported it in part because it's meaningless.
Well, it is. As Albanese said, there's no compunction on the Labor official, state or federal, to put the preference of Greens anywhere.
Never has been.
Seat-by-seat negotiation.
So what changes?
Well, preferences are done seat by seat in advance of the election. So this was a great big statement about nothing. It's a straw man. They've had a huge fight about something that is in existence already.
Well, the huge fight itself might be beneficial because they've gone through how many conferences, flatliner conferences. They've done really well out of them, haven't they?
That's true.
So maybe over the other extent works.
It was designed to pick a fight. That's what it was, and have this argument. And
with the Greens, what we saw yesterday was an argument among themselves.
Well, that's right.
I think you welcome this sort of passionate conferences, and we used to see it at federal conferences in the 80s. But not when you're talking about yourself.
Yeah, well, you've got
if we're having this discussion about policies,
you've
it'd
got
be a
the
different
right
thing.
talking about the left crying into their sparkling Shiraz. You sort of wonder whether they worked out who their enemy is.
Well, we'll talk more about motivation and strategy later on. But John Faulkner is a bit of a hero of the rank and file. I think it's fair to say. But Tony Burke, for one, wasn't prepared to let him get away with it. Here's Tony Burke.
John Faulkner's speech, I think I first heard it in 1989, and it's a very good speech because it always tells us that the New South Wales branch of the Labor Party is very, very bad and John Faulkner is very, very good. I have never heard anyone give more speeches on this conference floor about party administration than John Faulkner. I will support any method of electing the leader that does not involve John Faulkner choosing the leader. The last time his vote was the decisive one, we got Mark Latham. I don't think it's the ideal model.
What do you make of that?
Well, he does get a vote, being in the parliament.
Yeah.
No, look, I think it's sensational. I go back to the old days when they were largely structured, weren't they? These blues up in the microphone, and afterwards they'd giggle at each other. But I don't think it hurts the Labor Party to be look like it's cleaning out its own rubbish.
Well, if they're being accused of not having passion, I guess they can argue that they've still got it somewhere in the back cupboard.
They could have a federal conference like this. It wouldn't hurt them.
Well, it's the Prime Minister's turn today. Now, whether or not she addresses this issue in her speech is yet to be seen. It'll be a bit like Tony Abbott talking to Indonesians and not talking about asylum seekers, you'd think, if she doesn't. But Christopher Pyne is onto this, and he suggests that this is the question that she has to answer.
Either it's a genuine falling out, in which case the Labor-Green alliance needs to be ripped up and Labor needs to go it alone, or otherwise it is a more choreographed display than a bird of paradise mating ritual in Papua New Guinea.
And that's the point that they'll make, isn't it, constantly, that, OK, if you've got a problem, divorce.
I think there was an element of confection at the beginning of this, but I think as the week went on, it went beyond confected and it sort of run off in 100 different directions, including affecting the Victorian election we're about to speak about soon. I think it started as probably, let's have a fake fight with this mob and get some product differentiation, but it's got a bit out of control. So.
Well, Malcolm, the newspapers tell us one thing that Julie Gillard will be addressing today.
Yeah, whatever else, and she'll probably dwell on this to some extent, the Prime Minister is going to tell the conference that the federal government will help turn Garden Island into a cruise ship docking centre complete with customs processing and the full works. And this is to enhance Sydney's position as the gateway, the cruise liner gateway to Australia. So it's going to be interesting that some of the first bits of Australia that many very rich, big spending tourists will see is Woolloomooloo.
And with the cross in the background there.
And Harry's Cafe de Wheels. But I think there's going to be one very, very disappointed Sydney-sider, and that's Paul Keating, who for years has campaigned to move federal parliament to Garden Island. This kills off that dream.
And if you can't get your airport right, you make a virtue of bringing people in by boat.
And I don't know how Barrie O'Farrell's going to react to this, because the New South Wales Premier isn't in favour of a second airport or even looking for one, looking for a site for one. So maybe he'll sort of join the Prime Minister in having a better cruise liner docking point.
Which all works into the story about why Brisbane beat Sydney to the G20, which we'll talk about a little later on as well. Well, that's the Sunday papers, and now we'll be joined in the studio by the Opposition Leader in Victoria, Daniel Andrews, and the Greens Leader, Greg Barber. Now, while they join us, here's a view on the alliance from Labor leaders in Western Australia and New South Wales.